During this unit, we're going to talk about energy and pathways that produce energy. There are two fundamental pathways that nearly all life on the planet, the vast majority, will use for energy production: cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So this lecture, this chapter, is going to focus on the cellular respiration pathway and how things use this to produce ATP. Other lecture will talk about photosynthesis and how organisms use that pathway to also produce ATP. But two terms I want you guys to make sure you get comfortable with. So write it down, fill it out, kind of work with the definition here. But two terms are autotroph and heterotroph. Now, auto means self-producer. It produces its own energy from the sun. So that nice sunset or sunrise image that we're looking at, that provides the energy source for producers to be able to run photosynthesis. Heterotrophs are organisms that derive their energy from consuming or eating autotrophs. Either they eat them directly or indirectly. So when we look at the picture of the leaf on the right, the leaf, the plant, is an autotroph. It uses photosynthesis to gain its energy to then be able to produce ATP. The caterpillar eating the leaf is a heterotroph. That caterpillar eats the leaf to obtain the necessary raw ingredients to produce ATP. So the caterpillar is a heterotroph. Now, if a bird comes along and eats the caterpillar while it's trying to eat the leaf, that bird also fits into the heterotroph category. So in general, any organism that we consider a producer running photosynthesis goes into the autotroph category, and anything that eats stuff generally is placed into the heterotroph category. Now the challenge lies when we find organisms that can do both. There are plenty of things out there in the protista group that can run photosynthesis, and then if there's no sun or not enough, they switch over and they eat stuff. So it really makes trying to use that as a defining feature of classification very, very difficult. It's not practical because you guys will get into protists as you go into Bio 112. Those things are just goofy. They're weird. We're also finding certain things that we always assumed are plants. We find they're eating other things. Think about a Venus flytrap. It actually eats insects. And then what we assumed were animals that now have the genetic ability to produce chloroplasts and run photosynthesis. A little creature called the lettuce sea slug. So keep in mind, autotroph and heterotroph are general terms. They're groupings. They are not levels of classification. But let's focus on cellular respiration for this lecture. So when we look at this, what we're going to see here with cellular respiration, the little cofactor, this little molecule called NAD+, is critical in these energy-related reactions. So we got NAD+ down here. This is an absolutely important cofactor that is going to be used during energy pathways. So I want you guys to circle that. I'm going to insert the big bright red star next to it. That should be hopefully a big key to everybody listening and watching. This is an essential structure to remember. So there's our little star next to it. Let me fill it in with the red. Okay, NAD+, very, very important in energy-related reactions. Okay, so the process of oxidative phosphorylation is the most common pathway for this energy production, for this ATP production. The analogy is a series of steps. And electrons, so we talked about chemistry, protons, neutrons, electrons. Electrons have this negative charge to them. When electrons are transported over to the series of steps we're looking at here, a thing called the electron transport system, they have a high level of energy. As they fall down these steps, they move from step to step to step. This is actually a transfer of electrons from protein to protein to protein. They are releasing energy. They're giving off some energy, and that energy that comes off is what drives the formation of ATP. So we talked about ATP earlier. We're going to revisit ATP. We're going to see it again. This is the key way to make large amounts of ATP. And an important, very, very important component to this whole oxidative phosphorylation, the electron transport system, is something has to be sitting at the bottom of those steps to grab the electrons and get them out of the way. That way there's room for another series of electrons to fall down the steps. In oxidative, oxygen is the key substance. You need oxygen there. It grabs the electrons. It bonds with hydrogens, forming water, and it removes the electrons and keeps those steps clear to allow additional electrons to fall down to continue to drive ATP synthesis. If you can't get the electrons out of there, the steps get plugged or backed up, and it stops the production of large amounts of ATP. Okay, so the other type of energy pathway is going to be what's called substrate level phosphorylation. Not nearly as common, so we're not going to focus a whole lot on it here, but what we're looking at here is the ADP molecule, adenosine diphosphate, attaches to an enzyme. The enzyme allows the bonding of an extra phosphate to the ADP, and that's what creates ATP. Generally, pyruvate is associated with that conversion. Not nearly as common, so we're not going to focus too much on that type of energy production pathway. But the key one we want to look at is cellular respiration. There's two types actually, so don't mess up on this when you see it on the exam. There are two types of cellular respiration. One type is aerobic, the other type is anaerobic. Both are cellular respiration pathways. Our body does both. It doesn't like anaerobic. It prefers to always be in aerobic conditions. So we'll look at aerobic first, and then we will talk about anaerobic, meaning without oxygen. So we're looking at a mitochondria. That's the little powerhouse in the cell. That is your engine. The greater the number of mitochondria you have, the more energy you can produce. But in order to do this, you better have the raw ingredients. Just like a car needs gasoline, the mitochondria needs substrates. And if it is aerobic respiration, it needs oxygen, O2, as a gas goes in, but it also needs an energy source. The prime energy source, the best one for this, is glucose, C6H12O6. Glucose goes into the cell and can get to the mitochondria and get turned into ATP very quickly. Now, the end products of the reaction will be ATP. If everything's done right, hopefully we're getting about 36 of them. It's going to produce carbon dioxide, it's going to produce water, and it will also produce heat. Cellular respiration follows the laws of thermodynamics. Any conversion of energy, any conversion of any substrate to something else, there will be the production of heat, because nothing is 100% efficient. Energy is lost in the form of heat. So again, two things going in for aerobic: oxygen, glucose. We can use other foods and other sources, which we'll get to later, but focus right now on oxygen and glucose as your substrates, and then carbon dioxide, water, ATP, and heat. as your end products. It doesn't matter which order you place them in, as long as you know what to go in and what for come out, you're going to be fine for that part of the chapter for that particular information. Okay, so let's sit down and have breakfast here. If this was our breakfast, a pretty fancy, nice breakfast, looks like we got some cheese and ham and a nice big, I don't know if that's an omelet or what that is, but it looks pretty good. Looks like we got some muffins or bread over there. So we're getting all the food groups here. We're getting carbs, fats, proteins. Those are all the basic ingredients going in. The first thing your body will look for is glucose. It wants that. That's what glucose is for. Glucose is for quick bursts of energy. It goes in easy, it fits inside the cell, it gets to the mitochondria and goes through this pathway. Size is essential. You have to have a very small molecule in order for it to diffuse into the cell and go through the metabolic pathway. A big molecule like starch, so those rolls or that bread there, full of starch, it has to go through digestion. And that's going to take hours before it can actually get into your cell and get converted into ATP. So we always want to have glucose at hand. The body wants that for that fast conversion process. 1 gram of carbohydrates will net us 4 calories of energy. So if you bring in 100 grams, you got 400 calories of energy. The fat we consume, if it's used for energy production, because fat should be used for other things like making cell membranes and shock absorption and cushioning and all these other things, that fat gets converted into 9 calories of energy. So if we ate the same amount of fat as we did carbs, we said 100 grams of carbs, if you have 100 grams of fat, you're going to get 900 calories of energy, a whole lot more, over twice the amount of energy from the fat than you got from the carbs. So that's always the problem. If we're consuming too many grams of a certain food group, we're getting too many calories and we don't burn it all and then we store it. The protein, we really do not want to use protein for energy. There are so many other more important functions of proteins. Think about enzymes, think about the membranes, the transport through the cell membranes. Think about your hair, your fingernails, structural support, hormones, immune system. That's what you should use your protein for, not energy. But if the body needs it, either it means you have an excessive amount of protein in your diet and you've satisfied all the other needs and now you're going to turn it into energy, or you're in a starvation mode and you cannot use it for those other things because you're so desperate to get energy. Protein will net you or give you 4 calories of energy per gram. So it gives you the same amount as you get out of the carbs. So keep in mind, when we eat, we should be eating a balanced diet. We're all different. We all need to figure this out for ourselves. What our body wants, what our body needs. Those needs will change based upon how active we are, our age, our gender, the environment. If we're under stress, those things are constantly changing. So you constantly have to be aware of what you consume, what it's doing in your body, and what kind of energy return it's going to get, or that you're going to get from the foods you've consumed. So there's no magic solution to, if somebody wants to lose weight, to say, well, I'm just going to eliminate this or get rid of that. It's understanding how your body works with this and how your metabolic pathway functions. So if you guys want to increase your metabolism, add more mitochondria. Get more of these little engines into your body and your metabolic rate goes up. Now the 2 tissues that contain the largest concentration of mitochondria, nerve tissue, we can't really increase that. But the other tissue, or cell types, are muscle. So if you increase your muscle mass, and I'm not talking about you have to become a bodybuilder and Arnold Schwarzenegger, but just simply increasing the amount of muscle mass increases your metabolic rate. So when we have this big giant breakfast, we're not storing the extra stuff, we're burning it off.